In the final years of his life, Carl Jung became deeply unsettled by a pattern he could no longer explain away. It was not something he rushed to publish, and not something he spoke about lightly. It was a psychological process he had observed repeatedly in the dying, so consistent, so precise, that it forced him to rethink everything he believed about identity consciousness and death itself. Just weeks before his death, Jung wrote privately about this discovery. The letter was never meant for the public. In it, he described a transformation he had been watching unfold quietly for decades as human beings approached the end of life. But what disturbed him most was not that this process appeared near death. It was that it did not begin there. According to Jung, this transformation is already underway in every person, right now, whether you're aware of it or not. And if it is ignored, a person can spend their entire life defending an identity that was never truly real, an identity built out of fear habit and the need to belong. What Jung uncovered challenges one of our deepest assumptions that we know who we are. He began to suspect that the personality we protect, the image we maintain, and the identity we spend our lives defending are not our true nature. They are psychological structures built for survival, temporary adaptations shaped by circumstance, rather than essence. Jung's most important insight did not come from studying people who were thriving. It came from studying those who were dying. For more than 30 years, he worked closely with terminally ill patients, documenting their dreams, observing their emotional states, and watching what happened psychologically as the body weakened and the future no longer extended forward. What he observed shocked him. As death approached, something inside these individuals began to loosen. The constant concern with reputation, achievement, and control slowly dissolved. The mental tension that once dominated their lives softened. The ego, the part of the psyche responsible for maintaining identity separation and defense, lost its grip. And in its place, something deeper emerged. Jung called this deeper presence the self. This was not the everyday self defined by name, profession, or social role. It was not the personality shaped by family expectations or cultural conditioning. It was something older and more fundamental, something that did not feel constructed but remembered, like a truth resurfacing after a long period of forgetting. What fascinated Jung was the consistency of this experience. Regardless of culture, religion, or personal belief, dying patients reported strikingly similar psychological changes. Their dreams shifted, their fear of death diminished, and many described the same underlying sensation, not that they were coming to an end, but that they were returning to something deeply familiar. In his private writings, Jung noted that the psyche seems to possess knowledge the conscious mind resists. It understands that death is not annihilation. It is not disappearance. It is a transition, a return to a deeper state of being that existed long before the ego formed. Yet one realization haunted Jung until the end of his life. Most people never encounter the self consciously. They meet it only when the ego is forced to release its hold, when the body can no longer sustain the illusion of control or permanence. Over time, Jung identified a recurring sequence in the dreams of those nearing death. The pattern was so consistent that he could often sense how close a person was, not through medical data, but through the symbolic language emerging from their unconscious. The first stage appeared as movement, dreams of long roads stretching into the distance, rivers that needed to be crossed, bridges, mountains, and unfamiliar landscapes. These images were not random. They symbolized transition, the psyche preparing itself for change, not announcing death directly, but communicating transformation through metaphor. The second stage brought a deeper shift. Figures began to appear in dreams. Animals, wise elders, guides, or watchful presences. These figures did not threaten or command. They accompanied. Jung recognized them as archetypes, universal symbols embedded in the collective human psyche. When these figures appeared repeatedly, he understood that the ego was no longer guiding the process. Something deeper had taken over. The third stage was the most emotionally powerful. Dreams became luminous and vivid. Patients described radiant fields, glowing cities, and figures that seemed to be made of light itself. Many awoke overwhelmed, not with fear but with awe. Tears were common, not from sadness but from the intensity and beauty of what they had experienced. Jung wrote that these dreams often felt more real than waking life, as if consciousness itself had shifted into a deeper, more authentic layer of reality, one untouched by time, identity, or fear. Then came the fourth and final stage. In this stage, the sense of being a separate individual dissolved entirely. Dreams no longer centered on the dreamer as a distinct self. Instead, symbols of wholeness appeared. Circles, spirals, mandala-like forms, images without clear boundaries or centers. The ego disappeared. What remained was unity, pure awareness without separation. This was not philosophy or religious speculation. It was pattern. Jung observed it across decades of research and hundreds of patients, and the sequence never changed. But then Jung noticed something even more unsettling. The same transformation began appearing in people who were not dying. Individuals who explored their unconscious deeply, through meditation, dream analysis, or what Jung called active imagination, reported the same symbols, the same stages, and the same dissolution of ego. People far from death were touching the same psychological territory as those approaching it. That was the moment Jung understood the truth. This process was not about dying, it was about awakening. The self does not wait for the end of life to reveal itself. It has been communicating all along. Through dreams you ignore emotions, you suppress symbols you dismiss, and moments of synchronicity that briefly interrupt your sense of normal reality and quietly demand attention. Most people Jung believed live on the surface of themselves. They defend identities shaped by fear, approval, and conditioning. They mistake the ego for the self and spend their lives protecting something temporary, fragile, and endlessly anxious. The ego is not the enemy. It is a tool, a structure that helps us navigate the world, but it is not who we truly are. In his final years, Jung came to a conclusion that many misunderstood. He said, "I do not believe in God." He was not rejecting meaning, spirituality, or the sacred. What Jung was rejecting was the idea of God as an external figure, something separate from human consciousness. What he had come to understand was that what people call God is not a being outside the psyche, but the deepest layer of consciousness itself. Not something to worship from afar, but something to realize within. Jung's final insight was simple and deeply unsettling. You are not a body that possesses consciousness. You are consciousness temporarily expressed through a body. And when the body dies, consciousness does not end. It returns to what it has always been. So what does this mean for you, right now, while you are still alive? Jung believed the self cannot be found by looking outward. No achievement, belief system, or relationship can reveal it. The self reveals itself only when attention turns inward. And the process Jung called individuation begins with one essential question. Who are you when no one is watching? Not who you think you should be. Not who your parents wanted you to become. Not who society expects you to perform as. But who you are beneath every mask and role. Most people avoid this question because it leads directly to the shadow. The parts of the psyche that were rejected, buried, or denied in order to be accepted. Emotions deemed unacceptable. Desires labeled dangerous. Truths that threatened belonging. But Jung discovered something profound. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the doorway. Wholeness does not come from rejecting darkness in favor of light. It comes from integration, from accepting the full range of what you are without judgment. Jung described signs that the self is calling. A growing sense of disconnection from the life you built. Intensifying dreams. A desire for solitude. Not because you reject others, but because you need to hear yourself. A quiet collapse of beliefs once held without question, and a pull towards something unnamed, yet undeniably real. When this pull appears, Jung believed there are only two choices. Ignore it, and live with a quiet sense of inner division that never fully disappears. Or answer it, turn inward, face what you have been avoiding, and meet the part of you that has been waiting beneath every mask. Jung's final message was not about waiting for death to understand life. It was about waking up now, while there is still time. Stop defending an identity built only to survive. Stop living on the surface. Turn inward, and remember what you have always been. You are not losing anything when you die. You are returning to what you forgot. Whole, eternal, free. The self has been waiting for you your entire life. The only question is, will you meet it before it is too late? If this message resonated with something deep inside you, if it felt less like information and more like recognition, then you are already listening to the self.